Right, folks, welcome to the Respect the Math podcast, brought to you by Reliable Tech Help. For all of your IT needs, call Reliable Tech Help at 502-797-7399 or visit our website at reliabletechhelp.com. That's reliable, help.com. Well, welcome back to the show. I am your co-host, impersonating Digital David today. We've got Digital David in the hot seat. I'm going to go with the name, when I'm not pretending to be Digital David, I'm going to be Curious Coral.
Nice.
So we are here at the podcast to talk about everything from technology to business, science, popular culture, and more. You can find us on Facebook, YouTube, and podcast apps from Apple, Google, Spotify, Amazon, iHeart, and others. Please interact with us online, and if you would like to hear more, please subscribe and share our content. We'd love to hear from you. So today, Digital David in the hot seat. The title of today's show is, Who is Digital David Snyder? That was a question that I put to you a few weeks ago. Who the heck is Digital David?
Yeah,
What is this guy?
It was a great idea. Just a little background. Coral and I have been kind of going back and forth for a couple of months now, and she was kind enough to give me you were kind enough to give me some of your time to kind of give me your overview of my podcast and this online persona that I'm trying to establish. And you had a great idea. You said, you talk a lot about the people that come on your show and other things, but you don't talk much about yourself.
Right.
And so you had this great idea of, who is Digital David Snyder?
Yes.
And I thought about that. And I was like, that is a great idea. And a day or two later, it occurred to me we should do a podcast and turn the tables on me, put me in the hot seat.
Right.
You could host it, and we can answer the question, who is Digital David Snyder?
Yeah. So trying to kind of dual purpose here, impersonate you a little bit. I've got my fun T-shirt and my glasses.
I like it.
I couldn't do much with the curls, but
that's okay.
I noticed in David's podcast, he's either wearing a fun shirt or a striped shirt, and I didn't have any striped shirts, and that's worked out perfect because he's wearing a striped shirt today. So
I'm kind of boring and predictable. Yeah.
So Digital David here, aka Curious Coral, ready to start the show.
Yes.
So the burning question everyone wants to know: who the heck is Digital David?
Yeah, I'm a guy who's curious. I've always been curious about a lot of things. I have a lot of hobbies and interests. I'm into science and math and business and popular culture, politics, religion, philosophy. I've just always been just an insatiably curious person. For as far back as I can remember. And it gets me in trouble sometimes because my curiosity will lead me in a direction of asking people questions about things that are inappropriate, or, the two things you're not supposed to talk about, religion and politics. And I always push back against that. I was like, well, those are two of the most fun things to talk about. You're telling me I can't talk about them at all? And so I've kind of had to learn when it's appropriate. I've had to learn to read people, because if you delve into those waters, some people can't have a conversation about it without getting upset or being defensive or it bringing up other issues. And so I've had to kind of craft my approach to that carefully to, look out for those types of things. So,
are you that guy that everyone dreads showing up to their Thanksgiving dinner?
I sure hope not. I used to be that guy. I don't know if people dreaded me.
You're more refined now, though. You're like, maybe this isn't the best time to ask about politics. I'll wait till after dessert.
Yeah, I definitely don't bring it up then. I do try to appropriately bring it up, when it's mutually understood that I'm with people that I can have a respectful conversation with and they're interested in talking about it. I'm certainly not opinionated in the sense that I want to engage them in a conversation to persuade them to my way of seeing. Right. I certainly have my opinions and my ideas, and I'll defend them, but it's not for converting people, so to speak. I'm not proselytizing.
And I think that's very clear from all the episodes of your podcast that I've listened to, that it just, you are able to uniquely hold that space of being curious and letting people self-express without, like you said, making them first and foremost feel unsafe. They feel very safe sharing their views with you, but also in the episodes that I've listened to, you've sort of reminded them periodically, whether you're reminding them or you sort of say it like you're reminding your listeners. I think it's helpful to remind that, hey, I'm not here to change you. You're not here to change me. We're just talking about things. Mm-hmm. So,
yeah, I hope so. So I've always been curious. I've always thought about a lot of things. I've always been an interested person. I'm always getting on this kick or that kick, whether it's collecting or whether it's working out. I'm interested in politics. I'm interested in popular culture. I love being an American. I'm very proud to live in this country. I feel it's a privilege. The opportunity that we have, and both in the forms of personal liberty and economic opportunity, has been really done or has been good for myself and my family and our businesses. Yeah. So I'm always just thinking and asking questions and trying to learn more. And it's hard sometimes for me to turn that off. I've kind of entering a different phase in my life now where I'm looking like, okay, what's the next half of my life look like? And it occurred to me when my wife and my son went away for a trip for a few days, I just couldn't sit on the couch and do nothing. And I was like, you don't want to sit on the couch and do nothing all the time because then you'll be, not productive.
Couch potato.
Yeah. But I think there is something to being able just to put the phone on airplane mode or just set it on the other side of the room and just be present in your situation and with your thoughts and I'm always on Reddit or Twitter or researching things on Google to learn more. And that's a good thing, but all things in moderation. Right. Yeah. And
so you have a curious mind, but you also have a very active mind. You're always churning out thoughts and ideas and questions and it's always going. It always has. Ani DeFranco, a good musician, once said, every tool is a weapon depending on how you hold it, So I've had to learn. I haven't heard that name in a long time.
It was really profound when I heard her say that in one of her songs. Every tool is a weapon depending on how you hold it.
For sure.
Yeah. So and that weapon has certainly made itself. It's certainly happened in certain phases of my life. I want to go back to when you said, are you that guy that people dread showing up? I've been that guy.
I'm teasing you.
Well, no, but seriously, it's a fair question. Because if you're opinionated and you like to talk to people about things, certain people are going to be turned off about that, right or wrong. And in my younger days, youth being wasted on the young, I had a chip on my shoulder, and I did think I knew the objective truth, and that people who didn't see it that way were wrong. And it got me into a lot of conflicts with people, and turned people off to me. And it occurred to me probably in my mid-20s that ultimately, and this came from studying physics, the size of the universe is unimaginably large, and the universe has been around for an unimaginable amount of time, and I am just not even a fraction of a piece of sand in terms of time and space and all the people that have lived. And when that occurred to me, I was like, I've been taking myself way too seriously. I've been blind. I've been blind to all the other possible things that I don't know or that could have changed or that I'm blind to or I have blind spots. And in that moment, I shifted and I was like, okay, you can still be passionate, you can still be curious, you can still engage people in conversation. But if you bring to the table, I'm right and you're wrong, what's the point of it?
So is that really the conception of the podcast? Is a way for you to be able to have those conversations in a free speech, kind of optimistic, people are coming voluntarily? I mean, is that really an outlet for you to be able to do what you love in a healthy, positive way?
Yeah, at this point in my life, I'm a big believer in the law of attraction and The Secret and doing things organically. And if it doesn't happen, if it has to be forced, then it's probably not going to work. And so like many other things in my life at this point, it was organic. I found myself having a conversation just like this with a client when I was working on his home theater back in December. And the light bulb went off in my mind. I was like, I'm having these conversations all the time. Why not document them, try to build an online following, see if I can make some money doing it, and here we are. But one of the pillars for it was free speech. I'm a huge advocate of free speech. Now, if you're using your free speech to harm somebody or commit a crime or call for violence, threaten someone's life and so forth, harassment, sexual, whatever it might be, stalking, that's unacceptable. But outside of that, I think there's no more fundamental and important human right than free speech.
It's like you said earlier, every tool can be a weapon at some point. So that's the boundary. I like that you have that boundary around the podcast and around people, sharing their ideas and opinions, and that's good.
Yeah, there was a great podcast I listened from Joe Rogan. He's a big influence on me, where he had a free speech rights advocate on the show. And they talked about the Skokie, Illinois case where the Ku Klux Klan in Skokie, Illinois fought all the way to the Supreme Court for their right to march down Main Street in Skokie, Illinois, and spew out their disgusting, hate-filled and racist and bigoted ideas. And they won. And they won based on free speech grounds, but they also won because a group of Jewish lawyers who's higher on the shit list of the Ku Klux Klan than Jews, volunteered to represent these people because they believe in free speech.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that really
powerful.
It was, and he also talked.
It's so conflicting and
yeah,
dramatic. Oh gosh.
Yeah, in a truly free society, which we have, I believe, or we're working on, and we're getting better. People have the right to take these liberties that are precious and sacred and rare and do some terrible things with them.
Right.
And that's hard to come to grips with. But if you start restricting what people can say and think and do in that space outside of the obvious exceptions of committing a crime or calling for violence, that kind of thing, then you don't get the good things that can come out of that.
Right. Yeah.
And I believe, you can call me a hack or whatever, but I believe this is the greatest country in the history of humanity. I believe there's plenty of things we have to fix, plenty of bad things that have happened in this country in the past. I'm not denying those, but the framework, the fundamental founding of this country is rock solid. There's no more fertile soil anywhere in the world to start from nothing and build a nice life for yourself. Tell that to the people in Ukraine right now. They don't even have I heard on the news this morning, Russia is targeting their power infrastructure because it's getting cold so they can freeze people to death.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. I mean, and they might be two separate countries, but those are all the same people genetically, culturally. Most of the people in Ukraine speak Russian. So, there's plenty of things we need to fix in this country. There's plenty of problems that are unresolved. And I fully admit that as a white male in this country, I benefit from some of the establishment. This kind of country was founded arguably by white males for white males. And I benefit from that every day a little bit. I'm less likely to be pulled over. I'm not as likely to be harassed in a sexual way in an office environment as most women are, or have been. So, yeah.
I like that. You have a nice dose of pride and also your feet are on the ground. You're like, I'm not over here saying America's the best and blocking everything out. You're like, I still think we're the best despite all the skeletons in our closet. And I think that really is what people need to hear, David, is, hey, I can be supportive of, the U.S. or life here and being an American and also acknowledge the things that have been unacceptable or hard or painful. I think you kind of hold that line really beautifully.
I'm empathetic. I try to be an empathetic person. I think it's one of my natural gifts. I've always been able to put myself in another person's shoes. Mm-hmm. And I'm not doubting for a second that it's difficult to be a minority in this country. It's difficult to be a woman compared to what it's like being a white male. I mean, that's obviously the preferred class of people. And there's a benefit to being that. Thank God over time, we've narrowed that gap. Mm-hmm. It's not quite as easy to be that compared to, a religious minority or a cultural minority or a racial or ethnic minority. So, it's
interesting. There's turmoil. I know a white male who was rejected from a job because they were specifically looking for minority, and he was like, "I feel discriminated against." And I'm like, "We can't even go there."
Yeah,
because they're trying to. It's just. Yeah, it's an interesting time that we're living in. I kind of want to circle back though, specifically to Digital David, right? So you didn't name yourself Curious David. The nickname you went with here is Digital David.
Yeah.
So did Digital David come as a nickname once you started the podcast, or did you already have that nickname when you were just working in your company, Reliable Tech Help? Where's the origins of that name?
It's a great question. Ever since college, when my friend who was getting a computer information systems degree and I was finishing up my philosophy degree, showed me all the cool things you could do with a computer at the time, I became infatuated. Mm-hmm. I mean, you can create music, you can make a movie, you can build a spreadsheet. I mean, there's all these things you can do in that digital space. And
note to self, have David help me set up my digital signature.
There you go. Yeah. Yeah.
All the little things that I struggle with technology wise.
Yeah.
I'm sitting with the man.
Shameless self-promotion. But no, I mean, there's so many things and it's all digital. And I figured out all of it by people helping me and me figuring out on my own. And what a great country we live in. The majority of it I got paid to learn by my customers. They come to me with problems all the time. How do I take these old analog tapes and convert them to digital so I can preserve them and distribute them? I learned photography. I was a professional photographer for a few years and did graphic design and cinematography and that kind of stuff. So, and it's all under this blanket of digital technology.
Okay.
So I've learned unbelievably amounts of skills. I got paid to learn most of it, which is really remarkable. So I dabble in a lot of things, most of them being technology related. And it just occurred to me one day, I'm Digital David.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And I always liked when digital first came out with DVDs, I always liked the way they looked. I preferred them to analog. And I especially preferred digital audio when the CD came out. Now, some people criticize it and say it doesn't have the warmth or whatever of analog and vinyl records and all that stuff. But for me, everything that came down the pike digital, I was all in on. And so that's my persona. I'm Digital David Snyder. I'm digital more than I am anything else.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and I wanted to I think that I have some ideas that are unique, and I think I can get them out there and possibly build an online presence and a following and maybe monetize that and give myself something, a new horizon to pursue. 18 years into running Reliable Tech Help, it kind of runs itself at this point. I got some really talented team members and loyal clients, and it doesn't require a lot of my day-to-day effort, and time and focus. So I'm just always chasing that next horizon, and I'd like to get my ideas out there and my experience, and that's part of what the next chapter of my life looks like.
Right. I feel like you're going to be a lifelong learner.
Oh, absolutely.
And a lifelong starter-upper.
Probably, yeah. Yeah, but that kind of leads us into our next thing. Speaking of the next phase of my life, it occurred to me about a year ago that this 18 years or so I've spent building a network and building businesses and building relationships with people and learning how to sell and how to wear all the hats of running a business, marketing, customer service, accounting, billing, all that kind of stuff. I thought to myself, it'd be a real shame if I developed all that and perfected it and didn't use it for anything other than just building another business and making more money. And so that's when I started See Good to Be Good. I tried to align myself with a few charities over the last year prior to that. For whatever reason, it just didn't work out, and that's fine. So I said, screw it, I'll start my own charity. And so that's what I did. And so I want to leverage my resources, my network, my professional experience and skill sets to help people.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great.
I want to give people an example of, here's a guy that I didn't grow up poor, but I was in the lower middle class. I borrowed my way through college. It took me 10 years to pay off my student loans. And I did it. I got there. And I'm not one of these people who said, well, I did it, and if you didn't do it, you're lazy or you didn't work hard enough. I'm not that guy. I'm the guy that says, I climbed the mountain. Now, what's the next best thing to climbing the mountain? Going back down and helping somebody else get back up, and then repeating the process. So I discovered this genuine joy that I get and fulfillment I get from helping other people.
Right. Yeah.
So, and I'm pragmatic about it. I tell people, look, I found a path up the mountain. It's not the only path.
Right.
But if you want my help, I can only advise you to take the path I took. Now you can modify it a little bit if you want, but and I'm totally open if you want to find your own path. But if you're asking for my help, I'm pragmatic. All I can tell you is what I did that worked for me.
Right.
So that's the next phase of my life, is mentoring people, helping people. I'm real big into education, human rights, animal rights, that kind of stuff. So
cool.
Just want to chase that next horizon and do something other than make money.
I like it. I like the way that you kind of organize your thoughts and organize your interests, and you sort of check them off and you're like, well, that was satisfying. On to the next thing. What could that be? Let me research what the next thing is. And I just think it is so interesting. And you are such a dynamic. Oh, we should start calling you Dynamic David. Uh-oh. Because there is so much more. Well, there is so much more than just the digital stuff that you do. You have the hobbies and the collecting, and now you have the nonprofit. You're really like Dynamic David.
Well, my family, and I'm really into music and the arts. I was in New Orleans because it was February of this year, and I saw these wonderful blues jazz musicians playing, and most of the people were just walking around or just looking at their phones, paying no attention to these people. And I had a profound experience. My son and I were listening to a band play, and we were the only people out of like 50 people there that clapped for them. And the musicians were so grateful, and they thanked us for listening to them and acknowledging what they were doing. I was like, I can do better than that. I can leverage my experience and my resources and my network to help promote these arts that we take for granted a lot of the time. And most of those people are very humble people, and they don't make much money doing that. They're following their passion.
Yeah.
And so I want to help that.
Right.
You know, we have a needs-based scholarship we started to help someone go to school in the arts. I'm not limiting it to music. It could be, you know, painting, sculpting, dance, photography, just something creative,
Cool.
theater.
When did you start the nonprofit?
Started January 1st.
Okay.
Yep.
Do you have a website and everything?
We haven't built a website yet.
Okay.
Like all my other businesses that I build, I do it organically. And now this one's a little bit different because when I started it, I said I'm going to fund all the expenses of it from my own personal money.
Okay.
So it's a little bit different than most of my businesses because I started a business and I don't buy a bunch of stuff and build a website and pay for all this marketing and all that until I prove my concept. I get revenue from that, and then I use the revenue to pay for those things like I did with this podcast. I put a little bit of my money into it for equipment and stuff to get started, but I was revenue positive and profitable within 6 months. So it's a little bit different on the nonprofit, but I'm going to fund all the expenses out of pocket so that every single dollar that comes in the form of donations goes towards the cause. Cool. Every single penny of every dollar.
100% of donations. That's awesome. Yeah.
So, but I grow it slowly and organically, and we've only got a couple $100s that we've raised so far, but that's okay because we'll get there.
Right.
Down the road, and it doesn't have a hard timeline on it. But yeah, I'm thinking once we get to around $4,000 or $5,000, we'd like to start the process of interviewing people for the needs-based scholarship. We're also collaborating with the College of Arts and Sciences at Louisville, the University of Louisville.
Okay.
I got to be good friends with the former chair of the department and now the current chair. And we're also going to work on possibly an internship with my company for a philosophy student.
Nice.
Yep. And then we're also going to work on maybe doing some fundraising for my foundation to donate to the University of Louisville College of Arts and Sciences.
All right. So you have a big 2023.
Yep. Well, the wheels are in motion, but like everything I do, and I'm big proponent of the Dave Ramsey approach. I'm the tortoise. It's slow. It's boring. There's nothing sexy and sensational about it. But the tortoise wins the race every time. So I'll get there. It might take me a year to two to get this scholarship in place. It might take longer. But I'm not going to compromise the system that I know that works over and over again because I've proven it and I've seen other people do it just to get a head start or take a shortcut. So
nice. Yeah.
that's kind of where we are.
Cool. Good for you.
Yeah, thanks. It's just the next, like you said, the next thing.
Yeah. Wow. That's so interesting. Yeah. Well, if you hadn't gone, I kind of want to switch your name to Dynamic Dave.
Let's do that.
If you hadn't gone with Digital Dave, what would you have gone with?
Oh, man, that's a tough one. I can't answer that right now. Let me think about it. Maybe I can come up with something. I
stole the second best answer.
Well, so I was known in my 20s as being sarcastic and kind of a chip on my shoulder. It's one time one of my friends called me an asshole, and I said, "That's Mr. Asshole to you."
Oh gosh.
And so that took
You're like
off.
the jerk, Steve Martin. You're like
yeah. So I was Mr. Asshole for a while. In high school, I was not a good student. I didn't like school. I was more into partying and smoking weed and cutting class and all that kind of stuff and hanging out with my friends and doing bad things. But I was with my friends sophomore year of high school at J-Town High School, and it was lunchtime, and I was telling them about, I think I had something to do with meteorology or something. They're like, "Dude, you're a nerd. We're going to call you Beekman." Remember Beekman's World?
Oh, my word.
So in high school, I was Beekman.
I haven't thought about that in so long.
Yeah, so I've had multiple different names.
But now you're like totally in this like humanitarian sphere.
Yeah, luckily I found my way. I was telling somebody the other day that when I got to college, in one of the first classes I took, the professor walked in and said, "This is not high school. I'm not going to babysit you. Come to the class. Don't come to the class. I don't care. This is your responsibility to get your own education, and your results will be the result of how much studying and effort you put into it and so forth and attending class." And I was like, wait a minute, I'm not forced to be here.
Is this when the switch happened? This is when you became the lifelong learner? Up until this point, you were through school, and then you were like, "Oh my God, I get to be a rebel here." I
was always a curious person, but that curiosity manifested itself in a lot of self-destructive behavior, partying and anarchy and getting in trouble in school and all that. So I had to find a way to harness it and use it for something productive.
You're like, "I'm going to become a genius."
Well, I tell people, and this isn't humility, I'm just being honest, I don't think I'm all that intelligent. I really don't. I think that I'm curious and I'm persistent. And so when you're curious and you're persistent, you don't give up. And so I've amassed a lot of knowledge and a lot of experience in a lot of areas, academic world and music and all the areas we talked about earlier. But I think only because I chased them and I was persistent, and I don't give up until I figure something out. So I'm not that guy you want to be locked into one of those breakout rooms with. No, because MacGyver will be over in the corner figuring out where the key is, and I'll be beating on the door until I pass out or the door opens. Like I have a brute force approach. Like,
okay.
Yeah, I'm not clever. I wasn't naturally gifted with a mathematical mind, or an analytical mind, or a problem-solving mind.
Okay, so you're like, let me absorb all the information, maybe not use it.
I'm the guy. I'm the guy that'll figure it out 2 or 3 years later after the talented person or the intellectual person. But those people tend to kind of lean on their talent. One thing I've learned by studying people like Michael Jordan is, yes, he was enormously gifted, but he outworked all of his competition. He had a commercial where he talked about all the mistakes he had made. People talk about, I've made so many game-winning shots. Well, I missed far more game-winning shots than I ever made. I missed far more game-winning plays or important, defensive plays or assists to his teammates. And he went on this long list of all of his failures. And then he said at the end, that's why I'm successful. Because I kept going.
Right, the persistence, the perseverance.
Yeah, and when I'm coaching people, I tell them, I'm like, you're only a loser if you lose and you don't learn something from it. And then you repeat the same mistake over and over again. They call it failing forward. I've made way more mistakes in my life than I've ever, made. I've had more mistakes. I've made more mistakes than I've made good decisions that led to good results. I'm still here, and I'm still. Yeah, I live to fight another day. I didn't have any critical mistakes that would,
So what about this new chapter that you're describing? Okay, this next phase of my life, I'm going to focus more on this. Was that prompted from a mistake? Was that prompted from a failing forward? Is there something that happened?
Well, there's a long list.
Or maybe it was good, something good.
Yeah, I just, like you said earlier, I have a lot of thoughts that are always just bouncing around in my head, and it just occurred to me one day, and I've tuned myself to listen to those and to trust those. So it's not a lot of like an epiphany or a profound experience. I just have these thoughts, and I grab them occasionally and harness them, and then I just kind of ride them out. It was random. I mean, starting Reliable Tech Help was a total accident. I didn't set out with a business plan or start a business. I was working at Best Buy in 2004 selling computers, and people asked me to come up to their house and set them up for them. And after I left that job, I was working for an insurance company doing claims and auditing for 3 years, and I was fixing computers on nights and weekends. Half of it I was doing for free because I thought it was fun, literally.
Wow.
Yeah, and I got fortunate enough to get fired from that job 3 years into it. And I was making money at that time, not enough to pay my bills, but close to it. And I said, I'm going to give this a shot. And here I am. I didn't sit down with a master plan. I didn't, get investors or do any of that kind of stuff. It was very organic and natural, and it was just a result of integrity, doing right by people, and just chasing my curiosities.
And I think also seeing a need. Right. So like you said, you were helping people on nights and weekends that needed your help, whether or not you were getting paid. I think you saw a need and you stepped into it.
Yeah.
So what are the needs that you see, with Reliable Tech Help? What are the most needs that you guys see or calls that you get or ways that you can step in?
Yeah. I tell people we're digital plumbers. We're service people. We're not writing programs. We're not coders. We're not involved in artificial intelligence or any of the higher level, computer categories. We fix things. If you have a virus on your computer, if your network's down, if you can't print, if you want to replace your equipment, repair it, upgrade it, we do all that. We do a lot of fair amount of audio, video. We did a conference room for an insurance company where put a big TV on there and a fancy camera, and they can have conference calls with people all around the world, essentially.
So you could take brand new equipment, get it installed, set it up,
We source it too.
tell them how to.
We sell a lot of electronics.
Okay, so they'll say, "Hey, this is what we need for our media room," and you're like, "Okay, I'll buy it, bring it in." So, okay.
Yep.
Cool.
We quote people. We probably close most of the quotes we submit because 99% of the time we're retail or less. Most of the time we can save them money, but almost every time we can at least match the retail price. So why would they go buy it from somebody else
Right.
unless it costs less? You know.
Right.
So the need that we serve is a niche that kind of accidentally we just carved out. Most I call them my so-called competition because technically they're our competition, but they're really not, and I'll tell you why for 3 reasons.
Ooh.
Geek Squad, Louisville Geek, these other people in the same space.
Okay.
I'm not knocking how they do things. We just do them differently, and it's worked out for us. The biggest
I
one,
don't actually know what they do. I mean, I've seen their building. I drive past it. I've seen their cars around.
they do what we do.
I don't
Tech
actually.
stuff,
Oh, okay.
networking, cabling,
I would
audio,
assume,
video,
but
computers.
unless your vehicle wrap tells me what you do, I don't know.
Yeah, you didn't presume. Yeah, or assume. Yeah. No, what we do that's different is, first of all, we don't follow the managed services model, which is a fancy modern term for a retainer. Attorneys do it, certain types of consultants do it. And so our so-called competition doesn't want a one-off transaction. They don't want to come out and fix your computer and then not see you again for 6 months. No, they want to sign a contract with you, and you pay them a monthly fee, and you usually do that a year or 2 at a time. And then for that monthly fee or retainer managed services fee, they are obligated to handle your IT needs. So what we found is in a retainer type situation like that, there's usually a winner and a loser. Either you pay for more services than you use, or the provider provides more services than they get paid for. I don't like that. I like getting paid when I work, and I'm fine not getting paid when I don't work. It kind of keeps you honest, you know? So we don't do that. We found a nice niche of small businesses and residential customers. On the small business side, they have 20 or less employees typically. They know they're going to have IT needs. They can't tell you if it's tomorrow or 6 months from now or 9 months from now. And so they hire us for our hourly rate for our time. We fix their problem. And then it's a win-win. We get paid for working. They don't buy stuff they didn't use.
You're just kind of on call.
Yep, on call. Yep, they hire us as needed. And it's worked out really nice for us. There's a whole especially on a small business side, a whole market that's been neglected by the managed service providers. Some of these small business owners don't have the budget to pay $300 or $400 or $500 or more a month for IT when they may or may not need it. Now, for larger businesses, it makes sense because they want to budget their IT needs and all their other stuff out years at a time or months at a time. So it makes sense for them. I'm not knocking it. There's a market for it. It's great.
Right. It works for
a lot of
usually
people.
bigger companies, though.
It works for a lot of people. Yep. And so that's one of the areas where we're unique. Another one is we do residential work. 90+% of those folks don't want any residential work. If they do it, it's to lubricate an existing relationship they have with somebody's business. They'd be like, I don't really want to do it, but you're paying us $3,000 a month. I'll go out and help your wife out or whatever, the CEO of the company or something. They don't want to do that. And then the other area where we're unique is we do PC and Mac. Most people gravitate towards one or the other. We're equally competent in a Linux environment, iOS,
that's great.
Mac OS, and on the PC side, Windows. Yep, and Android, of course.
Wow. So what type of stuff do you get for the residential calls?
All kinds of stuff. A lot of networking stuff. Okay. Spectrum and AT&T are very good at getting a good, strong signal into your home. They're not very good at the Wi-Fi side of it, making sure all your devices can connect and stream and do all that kind of stuff. So we get a lot of networking stuff.
Just helping people get their Roku connected?
Yeah, but more importantly, like putting better equipment in.
Okay.
Yeah, like a mesh network or something like that. Increasing.
Get it in all corners of the house.
Yeah, because they're good at running a pipe to your house and turning the faucet on. If water comes out, they're like, my job's done. You can figure out the rest. That's where we come in. We'll put in a mesh Wi-Fi system to get them better coverage throughout their whole house. The intelligent home space has really taken off for us in the last several years. Okay. That's where you have controlled lighting, where you have audio, video, you have cameras in your house. You might have security components, motion detection, glass break sensors. We cannot technically install a security system because you have to be licensed to do that. What we can do is assist the client in installing their own system because they can buy those now from Ring or SimpliSafe or other manufacturers. We can assist them in installing their own system. Okay. So we do quite a bit of that.
Okay.
Quite a bit of intelligent home stuff. And that's Well, one thing that's been nice for me professionally over my lifetime is when I was a child or a younger person, teenager and younger, when your TV was out, you called a TV guy. Mm-hmm. When your stereo was out, you called a stereo guy. When you had an electrical problem, you called an electrician, all that kind of stuff. You had a security guy. You had a computer guy. You had all these different people, guys or gals, that would help you in each of those areas. Well, in my lifetime, all those areas have coalesced under the blanket of being IT.
Right. You're just kind of a handyman in the IT world.
And there's so
everything
much
electronic.
There's so much of it out there. I can work on your TV. Yeah. I can put a stereo in. I can build you a home theater.
Because I think it is a skill set that covers all those different appliances and, all the different products and things. I think it seems like once you kind of, not in any way, shape, or form to like minimize. I mean, the fact that you can do PC and Mac is so helpful, but you're an expert in an entire field, not in just like 1/8 of that field or something. So that makes it you much more sort of well-rounded and versatile.
Well, luckily for me, all those things kind of, like I said, coalesced under the blanket of being IT. Right. You didn't have your computer guy didn't work on your TV 20 years ago. Right. Now they do. Your computer guy didn't work on your stereo 20 years ago. Now they do.
Do you go into people's homes and just see like their mess of, like cables and cords and just be like, oh God, do you just carry zip ties with you? Do you like clean up?
I got a trunk full of all that stuff. I got a trunk full of all kinds of cables and tools and we do quite a bit of smart thermostats, like Nest thermostats, just installed one. We do, like I said, entry sensors for security systems, glass break sensors. We even do carbon monoxide and smoke detectors. Ring has
anything that is electrical.
Because all that stuff's Wi-Fi based. Yep, it's electronics, IT, all that stuff. It's worked out really nice for us.
Well, let me, as Digital Dave, Curious Coral, let me ask you a question that's somewhat controversial.
Okay.
I want to remind everyone listening that we are of no judgment as long as he's not saying anything that is harmful or promoting violence. We support free speech.
Absolutely.
How do you feel about EMF?
EMF. It's interesting you mentioned that.
You're talking about putting mesh in people's homes and
5G and all that.
Right. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I try to be
maybe explain that to our listeners.
Okay, electromagnetic frequency sensitivity, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Did you ever watch not Breaking Bad, but Better Call Saul?
No.
Okay. Did you watch Breaking Bad?
No.
Shame on you.
I'm sorry.
You should be ashamed of yourself.
I don't have time to watch TV.
Greatest television show ever made. Anyways, there's a character in there, and he has it. And so I'd heard about it before, but I didn't know much about it. The character really taught me a lot more about it. The prevailing wisdom here is that it's a psychological disorder and not an actual physical, biological condition. However, being an empathetic person, I would never take that approach when dealing with someone. And I actually have someone pretty close to me in my life now that claims they have it. And this person is, I'm not going to mention their name or anything about them, but this person sleeps in an electrically, a Faraday cage, essentially. That's named after Michael Faraday, who helped us. He took James Clerk Maxwell's equations on electromagnetism and helped us understand fields.
You're losing me, David.
It's okay. Sorry. He's a very important physicist, extremely important.
Okay.
Anyways.
Very important physicist has made an influence on Digital David's life.
Oh, big time. Yeah. I spent 3 years of my life obsessed with Albert Einstein. But anyways, so there's this thing called a Faraday cage, and it blocks all electromagnetic radiation. That's cell phone signals, AM, FM, cordless phones, Wi-Fi,
what does
routers.
It look like? Describe it.
Well, it can be anything. I mean, you can make a bed out of Faraday cage is a general term. It just means anything that's closed and blocks EMF from getting in. Mm-hmm. That's all it means. It's just a concept. I could turn this room into an...
Well, you see like the little stickers that you can put on things that are supposed to block, on your phone or stuff.
Yeah, that's not a Faraday cage technically, but the concept's the same. It's trying to filter out certain frequencies of electromagnetic radiation, which we're all made of, by the way, but that's a different story. So my personal opinion on it, I'm certainly not a doctor. I think it's more of a psychological condition where people, because they've done blind experiments where they've controlled double-blind experiments where they told people who were claiming to suffer from it they were in a Faraday cage and they weren't, and they reported feeling better. So I don't want to dismiss people who, listen, if you're struggling with that, I have empathy for you. Whether it is psychological or it's not, I don't want people to suffer. And this person that I know, he's sleeping in this Faraday cage now, and he claims it's changed his life. And you know what? I'm a pragmatist. I don't care what you do to get yourself to the promised land of being happy and functional and successful. If you get there, I'm all for it. Okay, but if you ask my honest opinion, you want to, you know what I think, I'm going to tell you. I think I'm not an expert on it. I probably know more about it because of what I do than the average person, but the disclaimer is I'm not an expert on that. Okay. But you know, the idea that electromagnetic radiation can harm you is not it's true. Look at all the nuclear meltdowns from the plants that have been damaged and earthquakes in Japan. I think it was the Fukushima power plant. So certain forms of electromagnetic radiation, ultraviolet radiation, which the sun emits, can cause cancer. We know that. That's why we wear sunscreen. So it's not completely out there. But in a society like ours, where we have standards and practices, and we have the Federal Communications Commission, we have the military, we have all these government entities whose job is to protect the public from these new products coming out, they're tested pretty thoroughly. And they have a long list of criteria they have to meet to be granted the ability to sell those products in our country. So I'm skeptical. Yeah. But I want anybody to get help and be their best version of themselves and be happy. Yeah. So that's my Yep. Do you have any thoughts on it? Because you brought it up.
I mean, I can definitely see that perspective. Yeah, absolutely. Even if you take something that's not like EMF, something like living in a toxic mold home, it can impact you psychologically.
Big time. It can kill you.
So people, when I was in a situation like that where I had to get out of a home that was filled with toxic mold. And
was it black mold?
No, it was worse mold.
Oh, worse than black mold.
Anyways, wow. I met with a lot of remediation people and stuff like that, and they would tell me stories about how it just impacts you psychologically. And people would, come out of those situations and be in a clean home, and they would just freak out all the time and swear that there was mold, even though there wasn't, and the lasting impacts of that. So I think once you are afraid of something, it can absolutely have that placebo effect. Totally. Yeah. But I also have heard so many stories of people who, someone who's sensitive to, like, they were getting headaches all the time. They're like, why the heck am I getting these, like, awful, awful migraines? And they realized it was every single time they got in their friend's fully electric vehicle. The batteries are just so big. Yeah. You hear stories all the time of people who are getting, cancer in certain parts of their body because that's where they kept their cell phone all the time, or, different things like that.
I can't discount those.
And we had Wi-Fi in my son's bed. That was just where it had to go, was in my son's bedroom. And we definitely saw some changes in him. And it didn't even occur to me until a year later. Oh my God. Someone mentioned to me, they were like, maybe it's the EMF. And we pulled it out of there, or we set it also on a timer where it wasn't on all the time. It wasn't on when he was sleeping, which is when he was in there for the longest period of time. We don't need the Wi-Fi on at night. We're all asleep. Yeah. So, and that made a huge, huge difference.
Well, there you go.
Yeah. So I think it's probably a case by case, whether it's, having a physiological shift of some sort, or if it is psychological. But
one thing that autism spectrum has taught me in my lifetime, when I was a kid, I'm not proud of this, we used to dismiss those people. We'd call them retards or idiots or whatever. And I'm ashamed of that I did that when I was a young man. And now we know, no, they just have a disease on the autism spectrum, most likely, or some type of psychological condition. And one thing that taught me was that there is not this disconnect. The temptation is to disconnect the biological and the physiological from the mental and the psychological, and they're interconnected. And so to just dismiss somebody, oh, that person has ADD, or they're bipolar, or they're autistic. No, that's as medical and as biological and physical and physiological as diabetes or heart disease or cancer, whatever it might be. And so I learned that lesson, to not dismiss those people and to not partition out disorders of the mind and treat them differently. A diabetic not taking insulin is no different than a bipolar person not taking a mood stabilizer or an antidepressant or whatever it might be. So I think that's an important thing to say. As far as the EMF thing, it's certainly possible that there'll be some study come out in the future, and it is real. It's certainly possible. Studying physics, and particularly quantum mechanics, which is the system that explains how things smaller than atoms behave, totally opened my mind that there's a world of possibilities out there, that even the things I'm most certain of and most convinced of could and probably are wrong, or at least my understanding of it's incomplete. So I'm not going to dismiss anything. Like, we could find out next week that there's a secret study that's been done and 5G is killing people. It's possible. Certainly, it's certainly possible, right?
It absolutely is.
Yeah. So that's my take on that. I want people to be happy, and if sleeping in a Faraday cage or doing whatever they do, turning off Wi-Fi improves their lives, I'm all for it.
Yeah. Well, thanks for letting me ask that question.
Yeah, of course. You're the host.
Yeah.
Thanks for letting me be on your show.
You're so welcome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. My goodness. So I think we've learned so much about you today. Some of your background, where the name comes from.
Yeah.
More about your personality, the character. Who is Digital Dave? Who is Dynamic Dave? Curious Dave.
And I've got a few more topics I'd like to discuss if we have a few more minutes.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about my religious background. I think it's important.
That is something that you have mentioned over and over about it being very important for you to hold that space, especially with the podcast. So that's a direction I wanted to go to, is, how all this kind of ties into the podcast. And it's really not just a space for other people to have their freedom of speech, but for you as well. And you do like to talk about these things with people. So I wanted to know what are the top, maybe 2 or 3 things that you like to talk with people about. I know religion is one of them, and politics. So tell me kind of where that motivation comes from, or what it is that you feel like you need to share.
What's more personal than religion and politics, right?
Right.
I mean, that's substantive.
Maybe finances.
Oh, that's a bit. That can be it. And those things can be intertwined as well, right? Yeah. So for me, religion is really interesting. I've always thought it was fascinating, not only what people think, but what they believe. And like John Mayer said, belief is a beautiful armor, but it makes for the heaviest sword. So like punching underwater, you never know what you're fighting for. So that was a great song, Belief by John Mayer. Anyways, the idea there is, look at the great things that have been done because of what people believe, but also look at the terrible, disgusting things that have been done based on people's beliefs. And so I think it's arguably the most important or interesting issue to talk about when I'm getting to know people. And I've also noticed that politics kind of influences that too. What I'll tell people, my observations have been, typically people who are extreme leftists, not just Democrats and liberals, extreme leftists, their religion is politics. And on the extreme right, their politics is their religion. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I've noticed that, and I think that's dangerous on both sides.
That's interesting.
And I have very moderate, independent political views. We'll get into those in a minute. But for me, I was raised Christian. We kind of bounced around to a few normal to extremely weird Christian churches where I saw a lot of weird stuff. You ever heard of being slain in the spirit?
Yeah.
I saw that stuff.
You have a very interesting religious place that you're in now with your past and in your family.
I'd love to get there. So I'm just kind of setting it up. So
Yeah.
I saw a lot of weird stuff. I saw a lot of weird people that were claiming authority based on religion. And you ask, well, why are you authorized to run this church or do this or that? And, oh, because God said so. I was like, well, that's pretty convenient, right?
Right.
I'll just say God said so and I'll take over the world. So I was always skeptical of that stuff at a very young age. I didn't like it. I was curious about it. But I saw a lot of weird stuff. I saw a lot of weird people, but I also saw a lot of good people. I saw a lot of really good, kind-hearted, compassionate, well-intentioned people just trying to find the truth, just like me. Yeah. And as critical as I am of religion, particularly the Christianity that I saw, I also take a moment to acknowledge the good things that are involved in it. And I genuinely believe that most people who go to a modern mainstream Christian church in this country on Sunday are told to love their neighbor and have compassion and be kind and be generous. And those are my values. Those are, I have no problem with that. And so I became an agnostic atheist pretty much about halfway through college as I was getting my philosophy degree. I just personally don't believe that the God that they're packaging and delivering to us doesn't make sense. And in my world, if it doesn't make sense, it's probably not true. People say, oh, God was looking out for me the other day. I didn't get in this accident. Well, God's not looking out for the people in Ukraine right now, or North Korea, or Iran, the women that are being murdered there for not wearing a head scarf, that kind of stuff. And so that always bothered me. I always identify with the that either guy A didn't care about or was punishing. It never made sense to me.
Yeah.
However,
There's inconsistency in what's being said about the character.
Yeah, and they pick and choose. They'll tell you, well, John 3:16 says this and so forth. Well, there's many passages in the Old Testament where people didn't do what God wanted, so he murdered their whole village. He asked, I think it was Isaac or Abraham to murder his own child as a sacrifice to God. I mean, there's some real backwards, sick stuff in there, right? And I'm like, don't quote the Bible to me if you're going to cherry pick certain verses that are warm and fuzzy and dismiss the ones that are brutal. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So that always gave me a problem. I've had a bit of a chip on my shoulder about it, but it occurred to me a few years later after I kind of settled on agnostic atheism, which needs to be defined.
I was going to ask you, I didn't want to interrupt, but I also
was
like, would you define that for everyone?
Yeah, and agnostic means I don't know. That's what agnosticism means. I don't know. Look, God could be real. Jesus Christ could be God's son. He could be the Messiah. I don't know. It's possible. I suspect that's not true, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then the atheist part is, I tell people, philosophically, I'm an agnostic. I honestly can't tell you one way or the other. I can tell you what my suspicion is. My day-to-day life is I'm an atheist. I don't think about God. I don't pray to God. I don't ask God to get me out of jams. So I'm practically day-to-day an atheist, but intellectually and philosophically, I'm an agnostic. Okay. And once I came to that conclusion, I realized there's a lot of good people out there just trying to find the truth, just like me, right? Yeah. I just want to know the truth, whatever it is. Right. And so I'm very open to, I've had several religious people come on the podcast, and I have a civil conversation with them. I try to put myself in their shoes, and I do genuinely believe those are good people with good motivation, finding their path to the truth. And I respect that. And I'm actually grateful there's a lot of religious people in the world, because there's a good chance somewhere on the planet, if clean water is being ran to a village,
it's probably a Christian organization.
Or not just Christians, Jews, Muslims, right? Yeah. Christians do a lot of that stuff, and they deserve credit for that. They're overall, in my opinion, a force for good on the planet. But a lot of religiously motivated people build schools for people in villages. They feed people. They nurture people. They give them medical care. They help them get jobs. A lot of the drug rehabilitation rehabilitation of criminals is done by religiously motivated people, primarily Christians in this country, but not limited to that. Countries as well. Yeah, and so I tell people I'm the least hostile atheist you'll ever meet. I'm not here to convince you there's no God, because I genuinely believe me trying to prove there is no God is just as radical as someone trying to prove there isn't one. So
right, yeah. Well, and the world, like you said, there's a lot of benefit coming from people who are striving to be what we define as good and loving and helpful, and
a whole lot. Yeah. And I'm a pragmatist. Yeah. If you go help somebody and you want to throw a little Jesus on them afterwards, you help somebody, right? Is the little Jesus you threw on them irritating? Probably, yeah. But hey, you help them. That person who needs a meal to not starve to death can handle a little Jesus.
The world would be a different place if everyone was, motivated in the more positive, religious ways.
Well, and Christianity claims to be Christ-like. I'm like, the Christ I was taught hung out with the sinners. He hung out with the sick and the criminals and I think called the least of these in the Bible. That's Jesus was a hippie as far as I'm concerned. Right. Live and let live, love everybody. Let's get along. Let's share our resources. Let's care for each other. He probably even puffed on a joint or two, I mean, so the guy was a total hippie, and we're not, in my opinion. So anyways, I just want to get it out there. I'm all for religious freedom. I respect other people's religious views. I'm not here to proselytize and convert them. I don't look down on them because they believe the way they do. I just found a different path, and it works for me.
Right, yeah.
So
how does that impact your life on a day-to-day basis? Maybe the shift that you went through from being raised in this Christian way and then now being your agnostic atheist self. How does that impact?
I defer to physics. I mean, physics and science has taught us so much about what the truth is. It depends on how you define the truth, right? For some people, the truth is that God loves me and God created me, and I'm going to heaven if I follow a list of things I'm supposed to do, and that's fine. But for me, the truth is, like, light always travels in a vacuum at a fixed speed, 670 million miles an hour, roughly. That is true, right? That's observably true. Quantum mechanics is observably true. If you want to manipulate an electron, you can't treat it like a little ball. You have to treat it like a wave. And it's been proven in hundreds of thousands of experiments. It's never been disproven once. To me, that smells like the truth. There's so much in mathematics that can, proofs and mathematical theorems, the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. That is a fact. It's never not true. And so there's so much truth that I've learned from science and math and physics. It kind of filled up that bucket I had that was empty, searching for truth. But I tell people it doesn't stop there. The humanities play a big role. Arts, sociology, psychology, the social sciences, the mental sciences. No ology has it all figured out. And that's one of the beautiful things about it. And you can hate on religion as much as you want, but they kind of have it cornered in the doing good works and having humanitarian values department. So, I think Einstein said, religion without science is blind and science without religion is lame. And that's Einstein, arguably the most brilliant person who ever walked the planet, the greatest scientist of all time.
Right.
So I think that needs to be said.
And I think there's much to be said about people having a hope in something unseen.
Absolutely. We all need that.
I think most
Hope's
people most people are born with an awareness that they are not the center of the universe, that there is something bigger than them, greater than them that's going on, whether that's an entity in heaven or just, an overarching, goal for humanity. They know that they're a part of something.
Yeah. It's a lovely idea to know that you were created by someone who loves you and bestowed you with talents and gifts you can use to find meaning and purpose while you're here, right? Those are great. I wish they were true,
I like, David, the way that in everything, you're one of those people, you don't just talk the talk, you really walk the walk, right? So it's so important for you to have your spaces to have your free speech, so much so that you created a space for other people to have their free speech. And I see this also playing out with your religion. So you are able to sit here and say, oh, I'm an agnostic atheist, but I'm not trying to change anyone. I'm really accepting of everyone else. And you truly, honestly are accepting of everyone all the way down to your home. So you're not living in a space where everyone has the same belief, and you're able to do that completely, genuinely. There's no impact on the love and the relationship that you have with your family. I mean, tell us more about that, because I really feel like that is you just living out how what you honestly say and how you feel.
Well, that's nice of you to say. I've always been interested in the idea of integrity. Met a lot of people who claim one thing and then do another, and that always bothered me, especially when those people had control over me, so some authoritarian position or role over me. I'm like, wait a minute, you're telling me to do this and you're not even doing it? Why should I believe you? Why should I trust you? So yeah, integrity is a big deal for me. I choose my words very carefully. You'll hardly ever hear me say words like that's impossible, that is never going to happen, or I'm 100% certain. I choose my words very carefully. And it might be so subtle that people don't catch on to, but if you're paying attention to what I'm saying, or you read a transcript of a conversation I have or something like that, those words are powerful.
You're very calculated before they come out.
Absolutely.
That's
yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I got to tell you, I go back to quantum mechanics. It is the conclusions of quantum mechanics are so bizarre that once I have finally quit resisting it and accepted it as scientific fact, it opened my mind up to a world of possibilities that wasn't there before. I genuinely believe that the Christians might have it figured out. I genuinely believe the Muslims might have it figured out. It is certainly within the realm of possibility that all that stuff is true, or some of it. So I can't dismiss someone's viewpoint just because it doesn't cross paths with the way I see things. With my family, it's very important. Well, with everybody. I don't want to commit to something and then not do it. And if I'm not going to be able to do it, I'm going to call you and tell you why, and I'm going to apologize. I've just always just been that person. Integrity is huge, Yeah. So you want to talk about religion for a minute, and then we'll kind of wrap things up?
Yeah.
Or excuse me, politics.
Yeah, definitely. So talk to me about your political views. How are they different than what you, maybe who you host mostly on this show?
I've voted for Republicans. I've voted for Democrats. I've protested by not voting. I've voted for Libertarians. I've voted for Green Party people. I'm all over the spectrum. My ideas have evolved as I've evolved over time. I was more conservative at one point. I was more liberal at one point. Now I claim myself to be a left-leaning, just barely left of center, extremely moderate Democrat. But I'm very sympathetic to conservative views. I'm very very sympathetic to the pro-life movement. I think if we value human life in this country, what's more sacred and precious than a little baby that can't defend itself? However, women have rights too. And I don't think a woman should be forced to serve a death sentence to give birth to a child if it's going to kill her. I also don't think a woman who's been raped or has a non-viable fetus should be forced to have that child.
Yeah.
And it's a tricky situation. But I'm very sympathetic to the pro-life movement, but ultimately I call myself reluctantly pro-choice because there has to be some exceptions. And I also believe it's a fundamental human right, male or female, to go to your doctor and have a private conversation about your body and your health and get medical care without the government being involved. And so that's my sticking point on that particular issue.
I like it.
But when it comes to like the economy and business, I'm pretty conservative. I'm like, look, conservative principles work for me. So I've got liberal views. I'm very liberal on the environment. But I tell these leftist lunatics that want to shut down BP and Exxon to save the environment, I'm like, you need to work with those people to turn this thing around. If you want to get us on renewable energy and stop the damage we've done to the environment, you need Exxon and BP's resources, their infrastructure, their scientists, their chemists, their money, their facilities.
That's just higher level thinking, David. That's these other folks they're approaching it from a much more like reptilian brain, like, oh,
yeah, I agree.
Smash,
tribalism,
yeah,
binary,
So take out whatever the bad, whoever the bad guy is, and whatever's not working. And I think that's. I mean, it's actually, I don't know how much you've spent time looking into Greenpeace and like the Sea Shepherds. Are you familiar?
I'm familiar with them a little bit.
They actually started out as a duo. And, saving the oceans and saving the whales and all that from being sold on the black market, and how that impacts our planet, actually losing those mammals. But anyways, they ended up going head to head, and one of the partners wanted to stay out on the open seas and, be there physically to stop the whale hunting. And the other one was like, we're going to have to work this from the inside out. And and that's really kind of that's how Greenpeace really came about, is that they're in the political offices. Yeah. They are doing the inside out.
You got to get in the game.
You really got to have both, it's just, so it's interesting.
You got to get in the game and be a reformer from within.
Yeah. So you're kind of saying the same thing with Exxon and BP, that's kind of more that higher level. We need to work this from the inside, approach this differently. Sometimes Hulk smash does not always work. So
and I think it needs to be said, and this is where free speech comes in. I think we have a criminal psychopath who used to be our president a couple of years ago. I really do. I think he's a bad human being. I think he's fooled a lot of people. I think he's thrown out a lot of political ideas like the Bible and the Ten Commandments and pro-life and that kind of stuff. And I feel sorry for the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th because they believe in someone who doesn't believe in them, in my opinion. They were pawns in his game of chess to steal our democracy from us. This, if people I know disagree with that or this offends them, I'm sorry, but I'm going to express myself. I think that man is incredibly dangerous. I'm glad he's gone. I hope he stays away. I think that needs to be said.
Yeah, you have. This is the space for you to say it, man.
But I respect the people who voted for him. I don't think less of them. I disagree with them. I know majority of my clients are conservative or right-leaning, and they're decent folks. I believe they got hoodwinked by this guy,
Well, like you said, I personally don't know anyone who is just they can completely agree with everything someone from the right says and don't agree with anything from the left. Like there's a little bit of a smattering.
I know several people
of a little bit of here, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. I think that being able to see both sides and potentially vote in those different areas depending on who's truly up for the election. It makes you a much more, and this is my opinion, well-rounded individual who's willing to take a look at both sides and say, well, what are you saying? Well, what are you saying? Well, let me to figure out where I fall on this and vote based on what my personal convictions are or integrity, where it lies, as opposed to just being labeled in one color or one corner of the spectrum or something, So I think it's wise. And again, proving, you really are open-minded to people who maybe didn't vote the same way that you would have, and seeing, well, they're good people, and, maybe they got hoodwinked or maybe they they voted for these particular reasons and not those reasons, or
Or maybe
So
he's
you
not a
have to-
criminal psychopath and I'm wrong.
Yeah.
That's possible. Maybe he's a good guy. Maybe he'll run for the Pope next. I don't know.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, I could be wrong, right?
But we have to be able to see people for who they are, not
and put
just
yourself
for
in their
how
shoes.
they vote.
And put yourself in their shoes and
Yeah.
see how, from their perspective, they voted for him or his policies. And genuinely put yourself in their shoes. And doing so doesn't compromise your own values and your own beliefs. It's called empathy, and it's a big deal. The integrity thing is very important for me. I tell people when I'm talking to them about politics, I listen to conservative talk radio a lot. I listen to Fox News. I listen to MSNBC. I listen to CNN. I listen to independent journalists. Like, I want to hear what everybody's saying so I can make my own informed opinion and not live in an echo chamber. And that type of radical partisan politics is rampant in our society, and it's dangerous. And it breaks up, the saddest part is it breaks up relationships and families and friendships and all that. And that's terrible.
Which is the reason why I avoid these conversations at Thanksgiving, because I know I have people in my family that are on opposite sides of the spectrum, and I just am like, can we just not talk about that, because it's just dividing.
Well, what's their motivation?
They're not able to hold space for it like you and I are, where it's like I can see the person and not their vote.
Yeah. But what's their motivation? Is it to browbeat you into thinking the way they do, or shame you if you don't? Or is it generally to engage someone in discourse, be respectful, and try to learn something from them? That's when I engage somebody in a conversation. Yeah. The world would be a boring place if everybody was like me. I enjoy conversations with people I agree with, but I prefer conversation with people I disagree with, because I learn from that.
Right.
So
Absolutely.
I think that needs to be said, but my open-mindedness.
Not everyone has that gift, David. I think more and more people are coming to that because they value peace over your position.
It's a binary choice.
Politics.
Do you want to keep your best friend, or you want to be right about politics?
I think there's a shift in, at least the people that I know that are here in the U.S. just going, it's just not worth it. I do want to be your friend. I do want to be friends with my neighbor. We don't need to talk about that. I can see you for who you are, and let's leave this out of the conversation. So it's interesting because it kind of puts politics back in the closet. But I'm like, that's sort of where I feel like sometimes it should be, so that we can have a humanitarian, warm, fuzzy. We want to have relationships.
What are your values? Do you want to have a lot of friends, people like you? Dr. Phil says, do you want to be happy, or do you want to be right?
Right.
You can't be both at the same time. You can't be right all the time and be happy. So I just want people to know my open-mindedness and my integrity extends to politics. I can get into a heated discussion with you about it and disagree with each other and still respect you and not diminish your worth and your integrity and your character just because we disagree. I wish more people could do that. Right. It's part of the platform of this show. Yeah, well,
excuse me, and maybe more people will be able to, because I've heard you do that on some of your other episodes where someone shares their opinion and you say, well, I'm going to disagree with you there. And here's what I think, but I totally respect what you just said.
And I'm not going to insult you.
That makes a huge, huge difference. Yeah. So no, I think that you're leading by example. I hope the whole world listens to your podcast and says, if Digital David could do it, I could do it. Let's be more open-minded. Let's put love first, or kindness first, or peace first, understanding and acceptance. Yeah. So yeah, well, I appreciate you diving into that.
Thank you.
I think you're in an awesome space, and I love what you're offering for people, whether they come on your show or not. I think you're a little light in the world.
I'll have anybody on. Just don't promote violence, that kind of thing. Yeah. Other than that, it's all fair game.
Well, I want to transition to our segment,
which
is called 3 Questions, and it is brought to you by our nonprofit, See Good to Be Good, which aims to act as a source of hope and motivation and inspiration to help folks achieve their dreams. What's better than that? No judgment on the dreams. We are accepting donations to help fund our need-based scholarship to help a young person pay for their education in the arts. If you would like to help, please let us know. So the 3 questions that I have for you today. Number 1, why are you successful?
I'm successful because of the contributions of a lot of people in my life that took an interest in me when they didn't really have to. There's a long list of people, so I won't go into the list right now, but even down to the person that I don't even know at the grocery store 2 weeks ago who asked me how my day was. My success is far more a product of the people in my life and the things that have been done for me and the opportunities that have been put in front of me, far more than any decision I've made or anything I've done. But there are some decisions I've made that have led to success. One of them is you have to believe that success is possible. I chose to believe it even when I chose to think it and tell myself that, even when I didn't believe it, even when I couldn't see it. And that's kind of the fake it till you make it mentality. You have to believe in the possibility of success and reaching your dreams. I've also lived a disciplined financial lifestyle. I've avoided debt. I don't spend money I don't have. I go slower when I'm doing things because I do them organically and I fund them financially responsibly. Other than that, integrity is a big deal. I've got 2 other team members. One of them's fairly new, but the other one has been with me for 12 years, and I've always been over backwards to do right by him and make him feel appreciated and take care of him for his contributions to our business. And it's no coincidence that we're also really close friends, and we really care about each other. And by the way, he's a Trump-supporting conservative Mormon.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's coming on the podcast a week from today, actually.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So
I'm sure you guys have had loads of conversations off the air.
Yep. Absolutely. But it's
So
never,
you're
it's
pros
never,
at this.
it's never disrespectful. And I love him
good.
and I respect him. He's a family man and he's a man of integrity. I admire him.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, my success is by and large the result of all the good things and people in my life have done for me and the opportunities that have been put in front of me, and me making some good decisions and sticking to some conservative financial principles, saving money and not going into debt and so forth.
A lot of good tips there. My goodness.
Yeah.
So why are you happy?
I'm happy because I choose to be. I don't get up every morning with a smile on my face, excited to embrace the day. Some days I want to stay in bed. Some days I don't want to confront some customer I'm going to have to deal with later that day, or I have to go to some event with my wife or my son that I got volunteered for, right? That I'm not always enthusiastic about going to, or whatever it might be, right?
Oh my God, Digital David's human. I was starting to think maybe you were a cyborg.
No. There's other reasons to think I'm a cyborg. But no, I'm happy because I choose to be. And I also believe in the possibility of being happy. I think it's attainable and it's real. And I've always been fascinated before I achieved happiness by people that were happy. I studied them. I wanted to be like them. And I place my value in people and relationships and trying to be a better person a little bit more every day. So that's why, and my family, of course, my family is the single greatest source of happiness and joy and gratitude I have. So I've had a lot of things go my way in life, and most of it's beyond my control, and I'm just overflowing with gratitude.
Nice.
So.
Awesome. And then the third question here, what obligation do you feel?
Yeah, I look at success as a ladder, and I've climbed a lot of rungs of the ladder of success for myself as I define success. And every rung I climb, I look below me and I say, oh, there's somebody a few rungs below me. Let's take a minute and pause and reach down and help pull that person up. It genuinely is an almost euphoric sense of happiness and contentment I get from helping other people. So it's an obligation, but it's also a privilege to help other people.
Yeah, and we talked about that on my episode too.
Yeah,
it's so important. Yeah,
and it's so rewarding. I mean, I do it for selfish reasons, so to speak. I mean, it makes me happy. I genuinely enjoy it. It's not laborious. It's not a burden. It's a privilege and a source of joy.
Yeah, awesome.
So.
Well, I'm going to throw a fourth question at you real quick.
Yeah.
Last one. So we talked a lot about Digital David today. I want to know where the name Respect the Math comes from.
That's a great question. Thank you. You're full of great ideas.
This is just really like a what the heck, who the heck, why, who?
Yeah.
That's really what this episode is. That's what you can put as the tagline.
Before I answer this, I want to say something. If this thing takes off, and I hope it does, and if Coral wants to, she's going to be involved in this podcast at a much higher level. I'd love to hire your brain and your experience and your creative eye, but also all your great ideas to help take this show to the next level. So I wanted to throw that out there for those people listening. Hopefully you'll be seeing a lot more of me and Coral's contribution to the show if she wants to, of course, if it makes sense. So the answer to the question is, I happen to be working on a project where I was handling lots of different forms of media. There were still images, there were home video clips, there were DVD footage, there was audio, there was microphone recordings, all kinds of stuff. And in a digital workflow, when you're working with that stuff, you have to respect the math. You have to have a native resolution, both audio and video. You have to have a fixed frame rate. You have to have a fixed, what's called a bit rate for when you're encoding audio and video. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very delicate process. And when you're working with mixed forms of media that have different resolutions, different frame rates, different levels of compression, different levels of post-production, whether it's color editing or mastering, all that kind of stuff, you have to respect the math. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, it occurred to me, respect the math and you'll get through this project and the result will be what you want. And that just stuck with me. And I was like, so much of my life, I'm respecting the math. And so that's where it came from.
And even in the case of the podcast too, you're respecting the math that the other folks that come and sit here with you, that they've worked out for themselves. So respecting their truth.
I like that.
Yeah.
Great question. Thank you.
Cool. All right.
Yeah.
Well, let's see. C.S. Lewis said, true humility is not thinking less of yourself. It is thinking of yourself less.
I like that.
And I think you do that a lot, honestly, David. I think you're always thinking, first of all, you're always thinking.
Yeah.
Second of all, you're always thinking about the people around you, how you can help them, how you can make the world a better place. And I'll be so curious. At some point I would like to hear, what is your life list, like your bucket list, life checklist, like what's after this phase? What are all the things in your brain that you want to do?
I can answer that.
But I know that may have to save it for another episode.
Well, I've got a quick answer.
Okay.
The next horizon.
Oh.
Yeah. So
the next horizon.
We'll see what that turns out to be.
Okay, very cool. So, hey, listeners, we're so glad that you hung in this far. If you would like to be a guest on our show, or you would like help creating and or distributing your own podcast content, please contact us for more information. Thank you to the listeners and our sponsors for making this podcast possible and hopefully successful. We'll see you real soon on a future episode of Respect the Math podcast. I am Curious Coral, posing as Digital Dave. Thank you for a fabulous interview, Digital Dave, and we'll see you guys next time.
Thank you.